and then I had to make the connections and all those things. It was things that were over my head. When I opened up Anchor, I just had to open up Anchor. One thing before we move on, Jeremy, I'd like to ask you, I don't know if you heard about this, but big fan of Anchor myself. I've been doing it because of the simplicity of it. Let me tell you what is the thing that I was, because if you go to 𝗟𝗡𝗟𝗏, right, which I actually have experience with that because not at your level, but my initial hosting.
There's a lot to it.
For my dad's podcast, which, we have, obviously, my dad also, we have a lot of content. So I started doing the same thing for him years ago, way before Anchor. And the thing with 𝗟𝗟𝗟𝗏 was great hosting, but you had to go and create the accounts on Apple, and you had to create the accounts over here. I don't know if that has changed, but that's the way that it was. And then I had to make the connections and all those things. It was things that were over my head. When I opened up Anchor, I just had to open up Anchor. And I pressed a few buttons and I uploaded an audio clip and they will submit to all these places. They will get the account set up for me. And that was a beautiful thing about it. Now, one thing that I'll ask you, I don't know if you've seen any changes. I saw some changes. For example, I created a new podcast. And I have my podcast called the Facebook Marketing Ninja Podcast. On that podcast, I upload 3 times a week, all kinds of stuff, and my interviews with some clients, and brainstorming sessions with staff, and video clips, and I'm extracting the audio, and I'm all over the place. Not only interviews like with you and I do get, I think I'm gonna get close to 300,000 downloads right now, so I do get some attention on the platform, and it's great. Now I created another one called the Social Marketing Hour, and that's this. So I'm doing now only the episodical content on that particular podcast. So this is episode number 15. As soon as we're done, we're going to extract that audio. We're going to upload it there on Anchor. Now, one thing that I noticed that was different, Jeremy, I don't know if this has changed on Anchor or something happened with Apple that made it different, but it was not submitted to Apple automatically. And we were forced to create an account. I've
seen that too, by the way.
So I don't know. I was surprised. I was like, I saw my staff requesting access to the Apple account, and I'm like, what's going on? And we're trying to get the podcast on Apple Podcasts. And I'm like, wait a second, that happens automatically. And when I looked at it, that option was not even available there. So something might have changed on the agreements between Apple, maybe some privacy rules, whatever the case may be. So there are going to be some things that you need to look at if you're creating this to make sure that you get distribution across all these platforms. It seems like it's a little bit more work than used to be right now. That's what I observed. So you've heard about that happening before, Jeremy?
So I'll say, like with 𝗟𝗟𝗟𝗏, you still have to submit Apple there just like you've always had to. It does do the other platform ads pretty automatically for you now. You just click a couple buttons, which is really easy. So that's cool. But I have seen the same thing with Anchor, where you do have to submit your RSS feed manually, you just have to do it. And Apple's kind of weird with their security and allowing people access to their RSS and stuff like that. So if you want a multi-million-dollar idea, if somebody can figure out how to get into Apple's RSS feed and tell people how many downloads there are for different people's episodes, you're going to be like a gazillionaire, because nobody's been able to figure out how to do it.
So you don't have a way to find out how many downloads. That's such a good question
publicly
for you.
Publicly now, right? Yeah.
So you have to basically, if I tell you that I got 300,000 downloads, there's no way for you to confirm. You have to believe it, right? That is not available.
That's why we actually, as 𝗟𝗢𝗟𝗏 brand, since we book people on podcasts, that's one of the things we developed our own kind of metrics for, right? Because you're never going to totally know, because there's no governing body out there. There really isn't. I know they're trying to do a better job with IAB, but there's no public numbers out there. So we look at a few different things. We look at number of reviews, because it's not always going to be a huge, it's going to be the top indicator for a reason of you have to have a large audience to get reviews. They're just hard as heck to get. We also look at their ranking in Apple Podcasts historically. We look at it in a trend over 30 days, because somebody could have a good week and just bump up, because Apple Podcasts is actually ranked by the number of new subscribers you get in ratio to your current subscribers on a daily basis. So if you're kind of historically, in a good range there, that's good. And then we also look at social media. So based on that, we're able to find out what a great show looks like. But unless somebody can ever get into Apple Podcasts, API, you're not going to know that. So if somebody can do that, man, that's a multi-million-dollar idea. And go figure it out.
Right. No, that would be powerful. Now, Jeremy, I do see that still today when I look at the metrics, that Apple takes the cake, maybe still at 85% of all the downloads.
It's come down a lot more than that. It's come down a lot more than that. Apple's still around anywhere from 50 to 60%, depending on like what platform you look at. Because I know like it's also individual platforms that give out the stats. Like Libsyn will tell you like this is what ours look like. Simplecast will say this is what ours look like. So like Apple's, depending on who you ask, they're about 60%. Spotify 2 years ago was only at 9%, and now they're closing in on the high 30s. And then there's like, I think like 50 other different places you can listen to podcasts that account for like less than 5% altogether. So like it's Apple Podcasts and Spotify are the main thing. And you'd think Google will be big, but it really isn't, because it's just people either listen in one of those two places because Spotify's grown so quickly.
So Spotify actually took off in a big way, right?
Huge this year, yeah. They're trying to buy the space is what they're trying to do.
Wow.
They're buying production companies and everything else.
Right, so it's a platform to pay attention to, and I know they also had I know that you can even add tags to your episodes, and Spotify is making it more discoverable on the platform and such and such. So
and you can also create as a podcaster, you can go in Spotify for podcasters. I don't remember the exact website, but if you go to Spotify for podcasters, they'll give you like even more data on your streams within Spotify, like your rankings and stuff like that of your podcast. You just have to claim it.
Right.